Before you came to this TEDx talk today, how many of you thought about what chairs you have to sit in? How many of you tried to sit on an aisle or an exit so you can get up and leave if needed? How many of you know when this will start, when this will end, and if there are any breaks in between so that you can pace your pain throughout? If you've never had a thought like this, I envy you, because they're common for me living with pain. Chronic pain is a debilitating condition, affecting approximately 1 in 5 Canadians. Although common, it's often dismissed and ignored, perhaps because it can result from many diagnoses. Whether cancer, autoimmune, a traumatic injury, or any other cause, pain in and of itself is a condition and disability regardless of the source. It can also vary extraordinarily, from constant low-grade pain to severe, disabling pain requiring mobility aids and being bedbound. This extreme variability in cause and type of pain in part explains why chronic pain remains such an unrecognized and stigmatized condition. In fact, it was only in 2019 that the WHO even recognized chronic pain as a diagnosis. We are seeing a movement of pain recognition across Canada and internationally. And although I'm so inspired by the progress, I'm so hungry to see it grow further. My own experience with chronic pain began when I broke my back when I was about 5 years old. Specifically, the pars interarticularis that hold your vertebrae together so that you can bend and move as needed and your vertebrae stay linked. It went undiagnosed until I was about 19 years old. Because I was so young when I was injured, I didn't know that pain wasn't something everyone else experienced. I lived a fairly normal early life. I got good grades in high school, played competitive volleyball, spent lots of time with friends. It wasn't until first year undergrad when I started doing hot yoga that things got really bad. All the back bends began to shove my broken vertebrae off the sacrum, the bone below. It became so unstable that it began to grind back and forth. I not only herniated my disc, I completely ruptured it. I even wore down the sacrum with that bone-on-bone grinding. It got very severe, very quickly, and by the summer of first year, I couldn't stand for more than 10 minutes. I would have such severe back spasms that I would fall to the ground and be unable to uncurl my body. As the vertebrae slipped more and more off the sacrum, I lost sensation in parts of my leg, and I developed foot drop, meaning I couldn't lift my feet. The doctors were worried that it would sever the nerves controlling my bowel and bladder function, which I would lose permanently. So they rushed me into spinal surgery, where they tried to fuse my bottom vertebrae with the sacrum using some big screws. Unfortunately, my first surgeon made quite a few surgical mistakes and sent me down a dark 18 months. I remember it being so severe in my pain that I would have to crawl along the ground between the bathroom to my bed, and I lost most of my early 20s. During these 18 months, I was continuously dismissed by my surgeon and gaslit for the symptoms I was clearly explaining. For instance, I could feel those screws catch on my back muscles and rip them. But my surgeon told me this was impossible and that he didn't believe a young woman like me wouldn't have a successful fusion, despite all the x-rays clearly showing that my bones were not growing. Eventually, he told me there was nothing he could do and that this disabling pain was lifelong. However, my mom advocated for me and worked so hard until eventually I had a second surgery, which saved my life. I remember when the second surgeon was looking through my preoperative scans, he casually goes, "As you can see here, your low back's full of scar tissue from your incorrect screws ripping your muscles," which still to this day is one of the most validating moments of my life, because I had concrete proof that I had been correct to say that I was being ripped open from the inside out every day for a year and a half. Recovery was long and hard, so I won't bore you with the details of frustration and slow progress of hope, excitement, medical treatments, and therapy, both physical and mental, only to say I have my life back now when I never thought possible. But an aspect of pain recovery that I do want to mention as a learning point is grief. Grief is a common feeling that I experience, but also almost every person I've talked to with severe pain. The grief is a real loss of who you once were and what you were once able to do. And it's an important aspect of pain care that we as family, friends, and providers need to be aware of. Part of my hurt stems from the fact that in my early 20s, I was bedbound. I was using a walker. I was doing terribly in school. I couldn't be active. I had nothing on my resume. I was nothing, it felt like. I remember just feeling so trapped in this prison of a broken body, and it just feeling like my soul was trying to rip through my throat, just screaming to be free, but I wasn't. I was trapped in this broken body of a prison. And it was crushing to be left behind, to see my friends do such wonderful things like co-op and exchange and travel and hiking and being normal, able-bodied university students. Well, I couldn't even bend over to spit out my toothpaste. It felt like the old Nicole, the high-level athlete, the A-plus student, the social butterfly Nicole was dead, and it was just broken old me left behind. So the learning point here is to understand that the person in pain in your life or in your practice may be dealing with the loss of their identity and mourning who they once were. But new identities are constantly being made and continually changing. Chronic pain is not the loss of a person, just a past version of them. But this stage of grief can be incredibly hard to move past. I've had the absolute privilege of working with Pain BC, the world's largest pain-specific charity, as a pain health coach, a peer support group facilitator, and now as vice chair of their board of directors. I've had the opportunity to witness the resilience and struggle and hopelessness and hope of so many people living with pain. Moving past grief can really take its toll on some, and it's not something that we as a society commonly talk about. I've heard people describe the things their bodies were once able to do, running marathons, playing with their kids, cooking for loved ones, and the heartbreak of no longer being able to do those things. For some, this grief is so profound, it eclipses their current progress. It doesn't matter that they can walk 30 minutes now when not long ago they couldn't walk a block. Because in their minds, they're still comparing themselves to a past version that could run 20 kilometers. And if we pause, we could imagine how devastating it would feel to lose the abilities that bring us joy and self-identity, the frustration and fear and anger that may come with that loss. And yet, given the right supports, people are remarkably resilient. I've seen the dignity in people explaining how they can walk 30 minutes now as a victory in itself. I've heard the dignity in how people prepare meals all day, giving them breaks for their body throughout. These moments need to be recognized and celebrated as the powerful expressions of perseverance, self-respect, and hope that they are. But it can be incredibly hard for people to move past that grief and that pain. And those are only deserving of extra support, patience, and care for it. So I want to pause here and acknowledge that my story of resilience isn't because of a strength of will. It's because I had incredible parents who advocated for my second surgery. It's because I had parents who would support me emotionally and financially when I couldn't afford my medical treatments. It's because I had beautiful roommates who would slip me notes under my door saying they loved me when I was bedbound. It's because I have the most loving partner who is nothing but patient and has never once made me feel anything less than a warrior. It's because I'm in a country with the public healthcare system, and I've never once been assumed to be drug-seeking because of my race. When we see the news of the opioid crisis or hear of people on long-term disability, we must remember the people they represent and be compassionate to the pain, the social hardships, financial struggles, structural inequalities, and unlucky genetics that write the story of so many people out there. Although I still have back pain, it no longer imprisons me. I moved through my grief stage and came out the other side with empathy, passion, and a community of incredible people. I was able to accept my pain in part because I became so curious about it, which led me to a master's in pain research. I began to research the impact acute stress has on pain because I was so frustrated with people telling me to stress less to manage my pain. It felt like a limitation in what I could tackle and accomplish. And in my systematic review and experimental study, we found that even in control populations without chronic pain, The impact of acute stress is wildly variable, sometimes increasing pain, sometimes decreasing, sometimes having no effect at all. Which reinforced in me that there's not a uniform rule for anyone's experience of pain. And then we have to listen and trust what individuals living with pain are saying about their own experience. I also felt that throughout my journey, my pain was frequently brushed off because someone as young as me couldn't possibly be in this much pain. Or I had my pain dismissed and blamed on emotions like anxiety and stress because I was a woman. However, I'm a white woman in the Canadian healthcare system, and I became more curious about what people who are in more marginalized groups experience pain. So I did a project on Indigenous experiences of pain in Canada, and I learned of holistic views of pain. For instance, how the Anishinaabe medicine wheel encompasses the mental, spiritual, emotional, and physical aspects of health, which far predates the medical biopsychosocial model that we're starting to use in Western medicine. I learned about the importance of strength-based narratives and recognizing the powerful protective qualities of traditional medicine, culture, and self-determination. I also learned about loss of trust, and I'm mindful to say loss and not mistrust in the Canadian healthcare system. From generations of land dislocation, medical harm, and ongoing implicit, overt, and structural racism in the healthcare system. Having chronic pain is so much more than pain. It's about how you're treated by your community and strangers and healthcare providers. It's how you treat and view yourself. In my own short life, I've had a physio tell me she refuses to work with chronic pain patients because they're so emotional and so boring that they never get better. I've heard a pain specialist say that premenopausal women invent their chronic pain because they're bored post-retirement and that they're the biggest drain on the healthcare system. I had a triage doctor ignore my spinal surgery emergency and tell me I would have to wait years before my surgery. He says this to a 19-year-old girl curled up in a ball in unimaginable pain because, he said, it all goes back to Adam and Eve. Eve took the apple, so you women have to suffer. I share these examples from the countless I have because I need you all to understand that if a patient or loved one with chronic pain is defensive or guarded to you, it is likely because they are scared, frustrated, angry, or have had their pain dismissed many times before. We need to remember to view the person as more than just their condition, and shift our thoughts in healthcare from being broken and needing to be fixed to viewing our individuals in pain in the context of their entire person, their life, and their goals. And beyond all, to be compassionate to them. A recent 2024 study with just over 1,400 patients with low back pain found that physician empathy was associated with more favorable outcomes than non-pharmacological therapy, opioid therapy, and lumbar spine surgery. So as a physician working with these admittedly complex patients and conditions, we can remove that impossible burden of a cure and focus on working with our patients to rebuild their lives with compassion. And I can tell you, my best experiences with providers, regardless of what was actually done in the appointment, is when they just take a moment to pause and say, wow, I'm so sorry you have another injury. This must be so frustrating for you. But I can tell you, these instances are very few and far between. During the years since my darkest days, my life has continued with minor physical setbacks. I have hypermobility, meaning my joints are more easily injured. The translation being 3 meniscal tears in my knee, 2 knee surgeries, a rotation of joint pains, and various issues in my feet. Often these setbacks, although temporary, bring up those strong feelings of suffocation and that crushing sensation of being trapped in my body. But I have ways of forcing my thoughts to be patient and hopeful. However, despite my journey, I'm incredibly active. I hike, bike, backpack, run, swim, lift weights, which is another learning point. Chronic pain can be a dynamic disability. So just because your loved one or patient is active does not mean their pain is not deserving of focused care. Being so active, but also injury prone, can make it easy for people to ignore my injuries and only focus on my past spinal surgeries. I've endured so many dismissals in the healthcare system and comments in my personal life like, "Oh, what's wrong with you now?" To me, the most important coping mechanism with this is I have to be incredibly strict with my thoughts. I cannot let myself think of my body as weak because of my injuries even for a second. I must be diligent at framing myself as strong, resilient, a warrior in my own internal thoughts, because that's what I am. That is what every single person in your life living with chronic pain is. Because we must fight through a battle of pain every day to be where we are. Whether that's going to work, giving a TEDx talk, cooking for the family, or even just getting out of bed that day to shower. We are fighting an invisible battle against pain, one that I hope you all can understand just a little bit better. Thank you.